early 16th and 17th century, the English and the Dutch had close relation. They fought alongside one another against the Spanish. However, once the Netherlands gained their independence, their large navy began to challenge the English. In this video, black is playing the Dutch. So it is the Dutch versus either D4 or C4. But C4 starts the English. So I guess we could say the Dutch versus the English or vice versa. You know how grandmasters and masters tell you to fight for the center? Fight for center control. Well, what they don't tell you is that fighting for the center is more than just pushing a pawn to the center or developing a piece. When you make a move in chess, develop a piece in the center, that means you're making a commitment. You have some kind of idea of how you're going to fight for the center. It's not just placing a piece in the center. It's how you're going to fight. You're willing to put up a fight. You're willing to cover any weaknesses that you may have, and you're looking to exploit your opponent's weaknesses. If you have to sacrifice a pawn or two or a piece just to get an attack, you're willing to do so for the initiative. That's how you think. Don't think like a master. Think like an assassin. This is Chess Assassin. And all my students, I train them how to think like an assassin. One thing to keep in mind is that there is a distinction between the small center and the big center. The small center is made up of the D4, E4, E5, and D5 squares. Expand that square, and that would include C4 and C5 on the queen side, F4 and F5 on the king side. In this position, not only is black successful in playing the pawn to e5, but after capturing the knight, proceeds with pawn to e4. gaining space in the center. And always remember, if a bishop is traded off, then the pawns become your strategy for that color. Now we're going to focus mainly on tactical execution in the middle game. First, the rook on a8 x-rays the rook on e8. So the bishop is pinned to the rook. Next, the bishop on g2 along the h1 to a8 diagonal x-rays the pawn on b7. Next, we have the double attack. The rook on a5 attacks the pawn on f5, and the knight as well attacks the pawn on f5, called a double attack. Now the knight fork hits the queen and the rook. This is called a fork. Next, black likewise gets a mating threat against the king on the first rank. If queen takes rook on d8, then queen takes e1 check, and the only move that white would have is bishop f1, followed by queen takes f1 check. Here the idea for white is very basic. Keep the queen along the d1 to a4 diagonal. Develop the bishop to f4 and try to control the e5 square. And finally, line the rooks up on the c file. Black, however, is going to play the bishop to g7 along with d6. And the plan is to attack directly in the center with the help of the fianchetto bishop. Now, because black intends to play e5 and will play e5, the idea is to push the e5 pawn to e4. If you look at the position, the e4 square is covered by the pawn on f5. The d5 square is covered. And black is therefore covering both dark and light squares in this setup. When you are playing on a higher level, you allow your opponent to inflict weaknesses, certain weaknesses, in your position, sometimes when you see that it is going to be to your advantage, black allows the G file to be opened up by allowing the trade on H5. Why? Because black will advance the H5 pawn to H4, making his bishop on E8 more effective, giving it a root, while also having a bishop on the H8 to A1 diagonal. And black's rooks are lined up well on the C file, and the knight is placed to help cover the D6 pawn. So after seeing all this, you have to understand, that sometimes weaknesses actually benefit you. Earlier videos, a chess assassin has to be able to defend his own weaknesses just as well as being able to inflict weaknesses in the opponent's position. From the start of the game, the F7 square is a weakness for black, so therefore black is already prepared and determined to defend that weakness. Thanks for watching. See you next time, and remember to go over these lines and look for other ideas. Thanks.